Hey, how you doing? www.andrewmarkmusic.com on inflation. We've got a little stream of consciousness on this issue this morning. So, first I would probably start this off with saying there's never been free market capitalism on this planet, other than maybe for 100 years between 1800 and 1900, as this present system was in its infancy and just starting out. By the time the 1900s came around, the oligarchs had started to implement their plutocracy and corporate fascism, which we live under today. So there's a very small time through the 1900s where there was a free market type of capitalism. But even at that point, we could say, even during that century, there was still the holdover of feudalism markets. And feudalism markets were always predicated on the lordship, master-slave relationship in a way. In some ways, I think feudalism was better than this, but that's neither here nor there. Obviously, the lifespans, there's a difference to be made there about technology, but the quality of life that someone had under relatively stable systems, even if their lifespan was longer, isn't something that we should just outright dismiss, in my opinion. So, another aspect of life financially prior to the installment of corporate capitalism based on the fiat currency system was that inflation was relatively steady over 100 years. So from 1800 to 1900, the inflation rates around the world, as far as I know, were relatively steady. And if we go back 10,000 years prior to that, starting at 1799 and go back 10,000 years, the inflation was relatively small. So people, no matter what kind of life people had, they were relatively stable over long periods of time economically. And what's happened under the fiat currency system is just a massive spike in inflation in the last 120 years. It's getting to the point now where if you turn your back for 5 minutes, your cost of living doubles. Now this is an exaggeration, but it's making a point now that the present system as it is completely unsustainable. Another aspect of that last point is that when people could at one time have a healthy, stable life for 100 years of their life, or 50 years of their life, or no matter how long their lifespan was at any given period, it was relatively stable economically. But now people are having to shift gears so fast, even within a 5-year period, that it's dizzying, right? And then again, if we do understand this to be fascism, which I'm fully convinced it is, with the bankers on the bottom and the corporations on the top, and the governments being bought by them and installing their policies, what the center institutions do is they move the goalpost every 48 years here, and they just create instability. So if you're an individual and you try to say, I'm going to do this under this type of government, well, 48 years later, they overturn it all, and then you go out of business, right? So the implementers in the mid-level, that's a political structure, doing the bidding of the top and bottom, make it impossible for anybody to have a stable life. And their system as it is right now is there's 2,000 oligarchs that now own 70% of the planet. So they're sucking the wealth of what I call the global commons into their pocket. And at the same time that's happening, there's massive inflation If you go from 1900 to 2017, massive inflation. And it's leaving many people behind. We're already starting to see vast swaths of population just abandoned by this system. And yes, it's coming for you too. All the people that there's 20% of the people that have bought into this fascist system and have won the lottery here, but this is going to catch up to you too. There's an old saying about, another implementation of fascism, which was called Nazism. They're eventually going to come for you too. But I'm not talking about National Socialism here. I'm talking about economic fascism. And there's a very important distinction there, and it has to be understood. Economic fascism was implemented via the Chicago School of Economics theories throughout the earth over the last 70 years. There was a time between 1945 and 1965, a 20-year period, where the capitalist economies were not fascist in any outward, appearance, practically as far as you're living. Now, one could probably argue that they were still there, but they were just planning, their next move. If you go see if you watch the documentary, Everything is a Rich Man's Trick, you probably be convinced that this hypothesis, this theory, social theory is true, that they have been engineering everything for at least 100 years here. So we're in a situation now where there's going to be huge swaths of people in the next 30 to 50 years just abandoned by this corporate fascism, just through inflation alone. A city where you may have been able to live on $30,000 a year 20 years ago, in 30 years, you're going to need $100,000 a year just to have any kind of life. A house that was maybe $100,000 30 years ago will be up to $20 million, right? And juxtaposed to that, or in the dichotomous relation to that, is the McJobbing work and the gig economy, where the big winners here are prostitutes. And, I'm serious. Most people under this system now are being already thrown to the wolves by having no security whatsoever. And, ironically, who has the security here? Well, those oligarchs. They've secured life for themselves, and everybody else is in this social Darwinist feeding frenzy that they have set up here. So you have now a situation that's going to come upon society, our cultures, where it's just financially, it's going to be completely unsustainable for most people. And they're going to turn around and say, oh, no, there's not going to be any problems. Look, we've got this figured out. We've got that figured out. But the thing is, they're already abandoning huge portions of the population today. So, if they're already doing it today, then why should we believe their fictitious narratives about the future? It's obvious the only future they're concerned about is their own, Now, another, element of this that we should consider is how you can even maintain within this system, this corporate fascism. The only way that you can maintain here is to play their casinos. Now, the problem with that is that what they're asking you to do in the year 1750, you would have been hung for if you implemented these economic ideas. So they're asking you to play economic criminal just to survive, right? This is complete amorality, and I've argued for this many times on YouTube and on my posts, that the only way they could have implemented this amoral system was to get rid of the previous moral order. And I've gone into various ideas, theories, hypotheses on that, about why and how they did it. I'm convinced they did, and it's led us here. So just to touch on who's been abandoned already, well, under the bureaucracy of their corporatism, banking empires, and the bought and paid for politicians, you have this massive bureaucracy of mid-level people winning fairly well at the present time. But all the money that could go into it, if it was a streamlined a social welfare system, all that money would go to actual people who aren't getting it now. So this is a huge, huge problem. And it appears that they know this. And to them, it's just like, this is the best we can do. This is what's in our best interest. This is what's in the corporate oligarchy's best interest. This is what's in the corporate fascist best interest, to have this huge mid-level bureaucracy where all the money gets siphoned to these people, and the majority of the people on the lower end of the pyramid get nothing or very little and are being outrightly abandoned. And what I'm suggesting is that this is only going to get worse and worse and worse. They've already, as far as anybody that actually works for a living, they've already abandoned most people to the gig economy for life. Now they say, well, get an education. Well, this is what's happened to education now under their system. They're already starting to admit that their university degrees are becoming worthless because of the way they've set up this economy. This situation will only get exacerbated over the next 50 years. These degrees will become more and more useless. Along with this degree now, you come out of it with a lifetime of debt, and that's no accident either, because that goes to supporting, this toxic foundation of this corporate fascist system. So presently, you can still win under that system, but boy, they sure want a big cut of the vig, just to even give you a chance at it. They're asking for enormous amounts of money for people, and then basically debt slaving them for a long, 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 long time. And maybe they get a payoff. But as time goes on, even that system is going to become less and less functional and have less and less utility. So, this all around, this isn't working anymore. Okay. Now, the last point I'm going to talk on is the environmental issue. So we have this inflation economy that the very foundation of this economy of corporate fascism is based on massive inflation, and how that relates to the environment. Well, it doesn't. It's like, I don't know if you ever saw the movie Vanishing Point, where the guy just, drives his Challenger on speed, and eventually he just commits suicide at 200 miles an hour into a bulldozer or a wall. And this is, I think it's a great analogy to what's going on here. These corporate fascists are on speed. They're on fucking crack, and they're just driving the planet into a bulldozer. And they offer, all these platitudes about the future, whether it's Hollywood propaganda or Elon Musk, right? At the same time, they can't even, after 150 years, no one's created a town of even 10,000 people that is functional without their products. Okay, so that is a town over 150 years. There's not even one town of 10,000 people that is technologically advanced town where they're not using oil and all these other toxic products of the Rockefeller, Rothschild civilization. So, what's the likelihood, if we don't even have 10,000 people doing it today, that it's magically going to appear in 2060? That, all of a sudden, there's going to be this great environmentally sustainable. Come on, it's not going to happen. It's a fucking pipe dream. I'm not going to say they're outward lying here, but whether they're lying or not goes to the nature of reality, and I cover that in a lot of other videos. So, my own opinion, it's not sustainable. They're in denial. If we do a psychological profile of these 2,000 people, they're mentally ill, okay? They're psychopaths or sociopaths, and we have allowed them to take over the planet. I go into who they are. That's speculative. I'm perfectly happy to assume that they're fully human in the way that most people think human beings are. But even if they are that, and not only that, it doesn't do away with their mental pathology. And how does humanity stop these, criminals from running civilization? This is the conundrum. Anyway, www.andrewmarkmusic.com, my thoughts on inflation. Peace out, peace the fuck out.